But what we're going to do here, we're just going to gather in here for a few minutes of remembering Gary and sharing our life experiences with him, verbalizing our love and appreciation for this gentleman who was really an unrecognized island treasure.
Right.
And what we want you to do is to feel free to offer your remembrances and to share the thoughts that you have. We're not in a church setting, so they don't have to be censored. And you understand what I'm saying here, I hope. But what I would like for you to do is to, maybe we could all get in here a little bit closer. We are an island family, and we're here today to just give Kathy and Howard and all the family as much love and comfort as we possibly can. This is, as I've said so perhaps too many times on the island, this is what we do best. As an island family, we gather around those who have lost loved ones, and we seem to be very good about standing with families and alongside of them and sharing our love with them. And it certainly is a privilege for me today to be here and to spend this time with you remembering Gary. All of you probably knew him better than I did, but I did know him well enough to know that as I set out at the cemetery an hour or so ago, we had an island treasure in our midst that I'm sure many people did not recognize. And so I want you to, if you wouldn't mind, share with me and give me an opportunity to know Gary a little bit better. We all had different perspectives because of different avenues of relationship with him. And so as you share, I'd like you to just say your name out loud, because somebody here might not know you, Kathy might not know you. And just share your name and then go ahead and speak up the best you can with the noise that we have around us. And I know that some of you came prepared to share, and some of you have thought about it, but you're not sure at this point. But if you have something as a remembrance you want to share, I want you to know you have full opportunity to do so at this time. Kathy, would you want to say anything?
I just would like to say I'm Kathy, I'm Gary's sister, and I've met a lot of you, and a lot of you I don't know, and I look forward to meeting. But I wanted to thank all of you for such great generosity and caring and helping him get through this. So I just thank you, and he thanks you too.
Interesting is I don't think a lot of us even know each other, but we all knew Gary, and Gary was a treasure, an original, a one-of-a-kind, a person that a lot of people often thought was a little over the top, but he had a heart that was so full. I used to see him talking about things that were wrong with the world, and his eyes would tear up just thinking of other human beings that he didn't even know, animals, the environment. There was so much to Gary. And so I'm Terry, and I don't know most of you, I know some of you. And Gary was my friend.
Gary was. I knew Gary as a treasure, and we were intimate, well, really close. You know, not physically, but for about a year, and so I got to know him really well during that year on the radio with him, and I just felt like he wasn't supported like he could have and should have been in this community. That warm, fuzzy feeling I got reading the obituaries just doesn't cut it for me. I'm speaking from my heart.
It was a good obituary, but Gary had a lot of...
warm and fuzzy. What I saw him suffer his last 6 months, and that bothers me. It bothers me. So I'm speaking from my heart, folks, and I love the guy. And one thing I want to leave saying, that man was a true patriot.
Yeah.
and which I can't say for a lot of Americans. So he spoke his piece, and he spoke it strong, and it was worth hearing what he had to say. He had smarts. He had smarts up here, and he put it out to the public, and the public didn't want to hear it. So I'm speaking it right now, a little bit for Gary. Correct me if I'm wrong. People that know me knew him.
Gary did a lot of work for us. My husband, who died a couple years ago, was not in good health for a long time. And we knew Gary. And Gary came out and helped so much when he was passing. And he ended up in the nursing home. But he had a window, and he loved Abby. I tried to holler at her to get her to come up. She's a golden retriever. She loved Gary more than she loved Billy. And Gary loved her. And so he would come take her for walks and stuff. And Bill was in the nursing home, and I'd hear this little tap, tap, tap on the window, and I'd look over and he'd say, "I'm gonna go get Abby." Okay, go ahead. And then at the funeral, it was just out at the little church out by the cemetery, and we were standing outside waiting. I can't remember, we must have gotten there too early or something. And here came Gary, and he came over to me and he said, "Carol," he was crying. He said, "I didn't know." And I said, "I know, but you get in here, you sit with the family. You were very close to Bill." "No, no, no," he said, "I'm going to go. I just wanted you to know that I didn't know." And that was Gary.
That was Gary.
That was Gary.
That was Gary.
It's a nice guy.
Start for me. Gary,
Tell us your name.
my name's Dan. He's the first person I met on this island, basically. He was he had a radio station. I wore the shirt and honored him because we were also in the first bowling league here on the island. So this was the shirt that my friend Brian designed on the back. It's got that was Gary's political views. These were all the tyrants of the age, and we made him in the bowling team. We're going to knock him over. He was like this gentleman said, very misunderstood guy. He got blocked at every intersection. And I didn't find out about this until about 3 days ago. So anyway, rest in peace, my friend. Thank you.
Gary was always out here until he was too sick, occupying this corner. And that's why it's very fitting that we're having this memorial right here. But for those who know me, I also work in dispatch. And so I take the calls from concerned citizens and concerned tourists. And not infrequently, I would get a call from somebody who wasn't from town saying, "There's this guy. He looks kind of scary. He's got long hair, and he's tall." And I say, "Oh, that's Gary. He's okay. Don't worry."
I brought my sign today. I'm DT. I brought my sign today. I'm beginning my second year from occupying Congress on this corner. And Gary was very enthusiastic, and he came when he could. So this is my tribute to Gary. Thank you.
My name's Howard Stoneberger, and Gary was my stepson. And he was known as Scary Gary on this island. And I tell you, there's no one you'd want to be less scared of than Gary. He just, talk about turning the other cheek. All over there. Sometimes he was in a Cumberland High School, which is famous for the miserable time they had during the Vietnam War. And well, he never wavered from his peaceful hope for peace, and the whole nation finally came around to see him the way he did. And many times he would be beaten, but he would never strike back, and I'd have to intervene for him because I didn't know as religious as he was, as far as having respect for other people's opinions. He could be very tough with his tongue, and I think that caused a lot of it. But he had 159 IQ, which is about at least 20 better than mine, and 159, and it was brilliant. He was a wonderful guy to talk to when you were relaxed. And I'm very happy to say that at the very end, he was discussing God and understanding the meaning of forgiveness, and we forgave each other for our differences. And it was one of the happiest moments of my life. Say farewell. And thank all of you for everything. Particularly the hospice and the caregivers, the nurses. It was just...
and the Gary Smith Homeless Memorial.
No, you were wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I only met him a couple of times. When talking to him really helped me keep my sanity. And he was a treasure, and he was part of the old Friday Harbor. And people who've been here since 1986 or thereabouts, he was part of Friday Harbor. He was part of what made the community what it was, and it saddens me to not see him physically again. He was just a really neat guy.
And I moved to the island 20 years ago, and the first place I worked at was E.T.
Me too.
If you remember. And Gary was in basically daily, because Gary always did side work. That's how he made his living, was doing side work. So every day he'd come in and bring whatever two-party check he had in his hands and cash it in.
Help us with our plumbing.
Buy lottery tickets.
Oh,
and he'd buy lottery tickets and cigarettes. But the one thing about Gary that I think we'll all understand is that Gary lived life by his own terms, period. And he lived an alternative lifestyle that maybe most of us would never think of doing, but it was always done on Gary's terms. And if there was any memorial to Gary, it is that he lived life by his own terms.
I met Gary because I was struggling with two impossible foster kids, and he lived next door to me. And he kept my house going and my car going. After I got over being afraid of him, he turned into this magnificent help. And then I was writing a book about WTO Seattle, and I was hard at research. And I discovered that Gary knew every single thing that I was researching about global economic justice. And so even though he's a man of our island, he also had a really huge understanding of the way the world works. And he was astonishing in the breadth of his knowledge. And I just, he kept my car going for 20 years. I have a couple of things here that I just want to share because they're Gary jewels. And they were written down by several people who were with him. I know Gary was hard to help, and Mikhail, I want to say that to you. He was a difficult fellow to help because he wanted to be helped in his own way. I didn't know how sick he was, and I'd been gone a month, and I came back, and I just want to honor Joyce.
Yes.
Because Joyce got Gary a home so he could die at home. Yeah. And she the community came through for Gary when he needed it and wanted it. It was hard to give him something you thought was good for him if he didn't want it. And that was a complicated thing for a lot of us, I think. He and I had a $10 joke. Because when I'd see him in town, he'd say, "Hey Janet, you got 10 bucks." Those were the first words out of his mouth. If I had 10 bucks, I give him 10 bucks. If I didn't, I didn't. But he would then work it off, keep my cars going, and he never, ever, ever charged me more than $15 an hour. And he knew cars inside and out. He fixed both of my old cars nonstop. And I have to just share this one thing, because when I went in to see Gary, when I got home and he was in hospice and he couldn't hardly lift his head, he looked at me and he smiled. He said, "Hey Janet, you got $10." And this is one thing that I wrote down that he said that I just love, and I think about this every day. I'm going to read it a couple times, 3 times. Every thought you can have about everything you do is fucking important. Every thought you can have about everything you do is fucking important. Every thought you can have about everything you do is fucking important. This is a hugely wonderful Buddhist statement, and it has lots and lots of meaning for all of us in our lives as we give thought to everything that we do. Gary wanted his memorial here. He loved the Occupy Friday if he felt represented. This was what he asked, and here we all are, and I think that he's really happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm about Janet talking about Gary knew how to fix cars and all these things. He was a very creative guy, and he helped Tom, my partner, for a long time, working in the shop. And I remember one time Tom had this big heavy burl that he was going to carve and tie him with bronze, and he and Gary were trying to figure out what to do with it because it was so heavy. If you carved on it, you'd have to move it. So they figured out a tripod, and Gary got a bowling ball someplace and put the bowling on top of this tripod, and then got this big burl into that, so that way you could move it whenever you wanted to carve. But it was just a perfect example of his love to solve problems and to come up with a solution. He just loved that. And on top of that, he was an honest man and a good man. He was very special.
I think he was maybe dyslexic, I'm not sure, because he did the plumbing in my house, and the hot water and the cold water are all reversed.
But it works. But it works, right?
It works.
Didn't leak.
But I feel like every time I have to do that thing, I think about, oh, Gary. I think about how Gary
The reason that happens is because when you're under the sink looking up, left and right are reversed.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that does happen quite often.
My experience. Dick Snyder and Gary's family brought us here, Dale and I. And his mother and Howard and Gary were great friends of ours before we moved here. And he loved our animals, and I think he had love for a lot of things. And so I'm really glad that he brought us all together here, because we get to know a lot more about Gary from others. Thank you.
There's one example of Gary's knowledge. One time in Palo Alto, we had Dick and Dale had a Swedish sailboat. It was opening day, and we were supposed to get going. Wouldn't start. So we had to call Gary on the phone, because we were supposed to go up second and third. And finally got Gary on the phone. He couldn't read a word of the directions, but he figured it out. And just as the last load, we started up. Big cheer from everybody. But he could figure out anything, I swear. And it's wonderful to hear all of this. What you're relating.
I've spent about 3 weeks up here in the last 6 weeks, coming up to see him and take care of him and do what I could for him. And yes, he was a difficult patient. He didn't want help, but he was glad we were there. But I was surprised everywhere I went. Somebody when they found out I was his sister, they'd tell me stories. And it was so wonderful. And the amazing thing was, I didn't realize he slept around as much as he did. Because everybody said, oh yeah, Gary stayed on my property, or Gary slept on my couch one time. And everybody had a story and everybody knew about him. And it was really a lot of fun.
Was that your band that he used? Were
Yes.
you in a band?
Yes. In my former life, when I was a youngster. Yeah.
Those were some of his fond memories.
He loved music.
He loved music. Our dad was a frustrated musician and had a high school band, And he shared that love of music, and Gary and I in particular both had that passion, and that was Gary's true passion in life, was music. And so it's good that he could share it with everybody when he had the radio station. I think that was happiest time of his life. So, well, thank you for everybody. I mean, there's great stories to hear. It means a lot.
You're on.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay, Gary has asked that we read some of the quotes from Tom Paine, and here are some quotes. All national institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian, or Turkish, appear to me no other than human inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. The world is my country. All mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion. Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one. And lastly, a long habit of not thinking the thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right.
Bloody well right.
Okay. Press the red button again. Best state is what it is to speak. Its worst state is powerful. And the long habit of not thinking things wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being wrong.
I'm Ingrid, and I have something to share with you.
Fall and fall into the arms of God.
It's my understanding that Gary's favorite food was junk food. Is that basically right? And well, Little David was on the menu for this. Snowball was on the menu, but a bunch of places had. But somebody graciously bought cookies, and so if you're into that kind of thing, you might want to have a cookie with limited edition. But if you eat cookies, you can always have a cookie as a remembrance of him in the years to come. When you have that cookie, you always think of you. Again, on behalf of Kathy and Howard and the family, I want to say thank you for coming. Some of you might have some private moments with Kathy or Howard. You'd like to share something. But I just want to say that it's a joy for us to be able to come together and to remember this gentleman who had such an impact upon so many lives. Not everybody who wanted to be here could be here. And so I just want you to know that there are more of you out there who were supporters of Gary than you might think. And again, thank you for coming. Please help yourself to a cookie and maybe share with Kathy your heart, your love, and appreciation.